Assalamualaikum. The second round of table talk is coming to an end. Can I have your attention? So, in these two sessions, you have tackled some of the difficult topics. And I'm sure some of these conversations must be not so easy. But you went only to 2 tables, and you don't know what went on other 8 tables. So this is the session where you will know that. We will invite one by one all the moderators to come on the podium and discuss what went on the tables, the agreements, the disagreements, the common points, the plan of action, whatever you discuss, but it has to be in 7 to 8 minutes. You know, you are people of faith, pastors, imams, Gurdwara chief, temple chief. You deal with congregations, so you are already trained into giving a 2-hour speech as well as a 5-minute one. So today we are on this side, the shorter speech. So let me start by inviting, and all of these lead discussant. In your booklet towards the end, we have brief bios of all. I'm not going to read that. These are very experienced people. They have invested their lives in dealing with their congregations according to their faith traditions. We have, somebody asked me, how did you come up with these 10 topics? We asked our board, which consists of 10 people, some of them, they are in the United States. You heard our president, he spoke from Los Angeles. One of our board members is United Kingdom. That come up with topics that you think are difficult to talk to in interfaith meetings. And they wrote topics, and we came up with 25 topics. Then we circulated that, and we asked them, choose 10 topics in and rank order them. And that's how we selected these 10 topics. But since we have established a certain type of relationships with all of you, I want to tell you, this is round 1 of the difficult conversations. We will have more rounds because there is a need for that. So I invite Reverend Sophia, Heon, Egan. Her topic is gender dysphoria and faith communities. Please come. And there are other people who have now joined on Zoom, and this session is being recorded, so we'll put it on the YouTube.
Good evening. Good evening. I was the best facilitator they got, and it was the last topic that was left for me. So I guess there was the least popular topic, and nobody wanted to take, and I thought, okay. But we had a great time. I had great 2 different discussions, but I learned a lot from my Muslim friends, Baha'i friends, and Catholic friends from my table. I learned a lot, or really. Basically, we all agree that every religion is there to love. We teach love, not to hate others. So, of course, Quran, Bible, some place talking about LGBTQIA issues are sin, and we shouldn't, open ourselves to them. We have those certain no matter they are. And so I just typed everything, but here and there, I'll just try to summarize. So the Krumna teachings are clear, and Bible is also same, but some of them pointing that as Jesus taught in Christianity is from Muslim brand, all people are sinners, and in the end, we are trying to accept everyone in our community with love because we are all sinners. That's what he said. And but churches does not have this problem, but I didn't know this. Muslim mosque is separated by their genders. So when they embrace and accept people with gender dysphoria, like a man have this desire that they feel like their real gender is woman or a woman, their biological sex is woman, but they feel like their real gender is man. They have no space for these people, so there's these practical issues in their worship space. So this is the thing that the mosques need to deal with. At the end, we have some discussions about how to create safe space for people with gender dysphoria. And somebody said they have this great imam at his mosque. He builds up always great relationship with everyone and just try to talk with them in a safe and open space. I think relationship is important in this tough topic. And at the end of the conversation, somebody said, the real question is, are we really loving? I love this. For example, the example she shared with us is that is it more problematic for a transgender person to walk around in a mosque or a church or church or for a pastor or imam or Catholic priest to sexually assault children while pretending to be normal? Normal and abnormal. What is the difference in between those two definitions? What is normal and what is abnormal? Right? When we say, I look very normal, but I can be a really bad person, right? What's the normal and what's the abnormal? I love that question. Are we really loving? Thank you.
Towards the end, we will have about 15 minutes for some brief questions from these people. So I now invite Professor Inamul Haq, who led the topic LGBTQ and faith communities.
Okay, we had quite a bit of discussion. We have two Jewish sisters here from Afghanistan and our Guruji from Khalsa, Sikh Khalsa community, two young people from Indonesia, and quite a bit of Muslim presence to discuss this issue. We could see that this issue is highly contested, debatable, controversial, virtually in all religious traditions. So the dividing line here is really not religion, but tradition and modernity. Traditionally, religions are on the same page, and from the perspective of modernity, a modern secular person has another point of view. And we see the same thing in Islam. Traditionally, Islam believed only in male and female, two genders, but it did recognize transgender as a valid category, and they were accommodated in Islamic law. Islam did not handle modern issues of gender, as my previous speaker mentioned, gender dysphoria. Traditional Islamic centers of learning, Shia, Sunni, Qom, Azhar, Deoband, they uphold the historical traditional position which Muslim always held. There are few Western scholars, mainly in Western American and European universities. They are trying to reinterpret the issue, just like as liberal and reform Judaism and liberal Christianity has tried to reopen it. And they are creating parallel communities and some physical spaces also. But for the most part, I would say that overwhelming majority of Muslims maintain the traditional view, and very small minority is trying to reinterpret the issue. The issue is highly contested and evolving. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Inam. I would like to invite Imam Arif Bushkin. He has traveled from Detroit to attend our meeting, and his topic was justice and fairness in interfaith and intrafaith context.
Assalamualaikum. Good evening, Chicagoland. I'm in Chicagoland, or we are in Illinois. Brothers and sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Imam Arif Bushkin, founder and president of Interfaith Relations Conference for Humanity and Commonwealth Alliance for Interfaith Relations. I'm bringing you greetings from both our governmental teams and the members at large, bringing you good warmness and kindness from our organizations and from Detroit. I'm so honored to be invited by Dr. Mohammed Siddiqui and his team. So blessed to see these beautiful faces. I feel like I'm somewhere in May, month of May, not here in November, because in May all kind of roses growing in gardens and we all smell it nicely. So we allow ourselves here as a garden roses. That we discuss on this topic today on justice, fairness in interfaith and intrafaith context. This is a great discussion and great topic for nowadays. I had a prepared topic. In researching this topic to talk about, I found that two wonderful scholars from Pakistan happens both of them. Let me just. Excuse me, just a second. So many papers I have prepared for this. I apologize for this. Dr. Hafiz Muhammad Farooq Abdullah Allama Iqbal is from Open University in Islamabad, and Dr. Jamil Akhtar from Punjab University in Pakistan. I found a book, but they present articles that speak particularly for this topic, that they brought keywords: cultural landscape, religious freedom, human rights, harmony, justice in society. So in explaining their article, I brought up the Islamic foundational 5 pillars that allows us to be just to God as we follow these 5 articles, like declaration of faith, prayers, charity, fasting in Ramadan, and going for Hajj. Ones who wants to sometimes accept Islam as their religion, they said, they've been told, if they said declaration of faith of Islam, that there is no God and that, but Allah, and that Muhammad is mentioned of God, that their sins are forgiven. Brothers and sisters, that is just opening the door to come in the room. Nothing is forgiven because you need to earn forgiveness. Myself as well, and every one of us Muslims, we have to follow those 5 pillars all the way through our life, to the last breath. Prayers, 5 daily prayers. Give charity to the needy people, regardless they're Muslims or non-Muslims. In charity, you can see your fairness, which is part of our topic. You can give charity $5, or you can give $105. That's up to you. God knows best how much you have. You can pretend rich, you can pretend poor. Rich sometimes ask people for more, which is wrong. That is not fair. God will judge them. So once we do Ramadan fasting, that is only between person and God Almighty. God will judge our fasting and our prayers. What we do we follow His instructions and instructions of Muhammad, peace be upon him, His messenger in Sunnah and Hadith. So fairness is, or I'm not fair enough, or not fair at all, if I'm not fasting that day and encouraging other person to fast, even if he's sick or she. So we need to be fair in this, and God only knows our fast, that we will get reward for it. After this, we're going for Hajj, which is fifth pillar of Islam, to obtain Hajj in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, to visit Kaaba, which is considerable in Islam, Allah's house, God's house. Who follow those 4 pillars properly, his Hajj will be accepted, and then we can consider, hopefully our sins will be forgiven, not only saying declaration of faith. So we have to go through all of this. We discuss this, what I mentioned, and then there is some key words that we were discussing with the first group, which was about religious freedom. That Imam Charles mentioned that religious freedom should be respected. Reverend Susie said, do justice, love, kindness, and walk kindly or humbly with God. So this is what she said. This is similar as a pillars of Islam, be kind with God and follow God's instructions. Then we were talking about Brother Tawdi Rahmat. He said to believe in all prophets and oneness of God. Farooq explained that Shahada means submission to God. So this is repetition. In second group, we were discussing the lake of love because of some question why we are in this kind of situation currently, today, those days. The lake of love towards God and towards people, miscommunication among people, and character. Not enough character among the people. So we as an interfaith and intrafaith, we need to more increase love towards each other. We need more communications to establish among ourselves, and then about the justice to follow religious foundation. As I mentioned, 5 pillars in every religion, they have their foundation. So follow it, and will be just yourself between you and God, and you will be good to others. So let us not forget the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. As Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, do to others what you love, then do to you. So with this fairness, we will say about the fairness in ages. If employer have a different religious employees, if it's same job description is for 5 people, that they should be paid for fairly equal wages for their job, regardless if they're Muslim, Christian, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, whoever else, that they pay equally, not by religion, but by their work. So that is fairness, and mutual trust and respect among people. So this is what we have prepared for those 2 groups, and that is my honor to be here. And thank you very much, Dr. Siddiqui. I appreciate Sheikh Aslam that he said a few words to us on video, and I pray for his better feelings, for good health. And thankful so much to WCMIR for organizing this and this Islamic Council of Greater Chicago for sponsoring this is great. And I saw somewhere here, great friend of mine, brother Imam Abdullah Malik Mujahid. So if he's around, he's here. I want a special salams to him and his team. So, and if you need more for justice, contact Imam Abdullah Malik because he's the founder of organization Justice for All. Not only for Muslims, but for all. He will give you more information or details. And Dr. Siddiqui, he's always here, willing to work with you all. So contact him. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Imam Ali. I now invite Sheikh Ahmed Mubarak. His topic, the topic on this table was religious extremism and response of interfaith communities. Sheikh Ahmed has recently moved from New York to Chicago area, took over as Executive Director of CIUGC.
All right. So now does this work?
Yeah, it works, but the light should not be a problem.
Okay. So what we discussed tonight was we had an issue with the term itself and how it wasn't linked or associated with religion. Why is it that we said by religious extremism? Is religion always inherently associated with violence and extremism? And there's the word that was missing, which is violence. Is violence and extremism, do they equate each other? Do they have the same sense? Do we use them interchangeably? Or should we separate the two? Violence can be stripped from religion and can be just violence. It could be in other contexts that are not necessarily religion, could be persuaded by somebody who's not a religious person. There are many reasons for it. So we divided the topic to three areas. One of them is to define violence first. What is violence? And is it a phenomenon? Is it something that is neutral, always here? Is it pervasive? Is it particular to certain groups or certain traditions or certain areas or certain cultures? Because some cultures might appear to some other cultures as violent cultures, but to them it's just their nature and it's the way they communicate. I remember the last event by the Council of Religious Groups. One of the pastors was explaining to them that when they speak, they are perceived as violent people, while they just, this is their culture, this is how they speak. So we had all of these questions, and we had to collect from bright minds. I collected the bright minds. I hope that my summary in writing would be better than the one that I am presenting here, because I collected really bright minds from two groups, and those two groups gave the definition and delineation of the parameters of the concept violence, basically saying that they use the space, that if you violate my space, that is violence. They use the supremacy, that I was taught that I am better than you. Then if you really don't have behaving in any way that doesn't fit in what I was taught, that Len said that he was Protestant, that he was taught that Protestants are better than everybody else. So if you really act in a way that is not consistent with that, they will basically cause violence. There will be violence. Some said that there's a question whether violence is moral. Is violence legal? Can it be legal or moral? Is everything legal is moral, or is everything moral is legal? And we know that the state, for example, used violence to maintain law and order. And that is could be perceived by some, at least the state, who would be, in anywhere would accept that that violence is legitimate and the police should be armed, for example, in YPD and from New York, should be armed, they should maintain law and order. For other communities or other groups that maybe might be the victims of that violence, might see that this is injustice and this is aggression and oppression and such. So that's about the definition. Then we move to, I hope that the summary in writing will be better. Then we move to the root cause. So we had the definition and the root cause, and what should we do as religious groups and organizations? What are we supposed to do to mitigate, to contain, or to manage violence, or to reduce it, or mitigate it? I don't know the word looking for. Mitigate? To mitigate it. So the second one was the root cause, and they came up with all kinds of root causes for religious violence. They explained it by something else, not necessarily religion. They said that it could be the supremacy, it could be poverty. One of the people said that poverty can cause violence. If I am not comfortable in my own space, in my own community, I have to use violence to get my rights. I have the right to shelter, I have a right to food, and I have rights and such. So it could be poverty, it could be supremacy, it could be violation of my space, it could be not fitting into my own norms. All of those could be different forms and ways that can cause violence. And then we have to think about how to try to understand that root cause if we really want to come up with a solution to any sort of violence that breaks out at any time. You should look at the root cause. That could be a reason. We jumped something that was very important on the definition of violence. Who defines violence? Because you can have two competing narratives. Like in the Middle East, we use it as an example. One side, that violence that they're inflicting is self-defense, is survival. They want to, exist. And they think that everybody else is trying to exterminate them, or exterminate them. And for the other side, it's their freedom. They want to have their own country. They want to feel free in their own space and have their freedom and dignity. And this is our land and such and such. So we are resisting an occupation. The terminology that is used and who is identifying the violence has to do with the definition of the violence, and then would have a big impact on how you would react to that violence. For the solutions, one of them, the most important one, is to do more of what we're doing here. As one of the sisters said, that the solution to religious violence, at least, is to do more of what we're doing here. So education, we have to educate each other and our children about each other, about our traditions and religions, so that we can prevent maybe violence. Your bright idea, she has, what's the name? You mothers.
Oh, mothers.
What's the name? Lynn said that the solution, she said that the root cause is mothers. That mothers raise generations on violence and extremism and othering. That the solution should, that the mothers should educate the kids and create, build a new society, a new generation that is not violent and that is willing to understand others. So those are the solutions. I forgot the name. I think that maybe Lynn, I already brought your idea. She gave, no? Elizabeth, basically, I think that she's a Republican. She said, keep the government away from any solution, because we were thinking about how can religious groups, since they're organized members of the civil society or civil society, can approach the government and seek funds and help from the government to maybe educate about violence and prevent violence and such. She said, no, keep the government away. We as a community, we should do it. There are many other solutions. Hopefully that when you see the written document can provide you with more. And thank you very much for the opportunity and the food is tasty.
Thank you, Sheikh Mubarak. So actually, I was hoping that you will talk more about extremism than violence, because that was the topic for Reverend Bruce Duffield. And his topic is how religious groups can tackle hate and violence. So now you all can listen to him.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a lot of overlap and a great introduction. And, you know, kudos to WCMIR, the World Council, for sponsoring this. This is amazing. The two discussions that we had were so insightful. I learned so much from the experience, and hearing these summaries of the other conversations, I wish I could have been part of every one. Thank you for bringing us together, and I hope that this will be one of many more to come. Our topic was what religious groups can do to tackle hate and violence, and there was great unity in that discussion. We all come from faiths that teach really very similar principles about loving your neighbors, loving your enemies, finding the divinity in each of us, and seeking forgiveness, seeking reconciliation. These are truths that are throughout all religions. I learned so much, but I want to highlight what I learned from the Sikh perspective. We had a wonderful discussion about the teachings of the Sikh tradition as it relates to hate and violence. And there's one story that some of you may have heard. I had never heard it. Correct me if I don't tell this correctly, but it's told that there was an ancient battle and a soldier was given the responsibility of delivering water and nutrition to the injured on the battlefield. And so he went forth and he was giving water and support to those who were injured. And his colleagues, his fellow soldiers, noticed that he was giving water to the enemy. And they objected to this. And the soldier was confronted and he said, I don't see others. I don't see the enemy. I see only God. And that was really powerful to me, that this parable, if you will, teaches this great truth, that we are all humanity. There's the teaching from Imam Allama Iqbal that you mentioned, and this was very powerful to me. Before you were a Muslim, before you were a Christian, or a Jew, or a Hindu, or a Zoroastrian, or a Baha'i, before any of these, you were a human being. And that's a powerful teaching. And that was consistent throughout. I mean, we talked about so many wonderful principles of the Baha'i belief in unity and brotherhood of all. The great teaching from the Quran, that God created the nations and the tribes, that we may get to know one another and not despise one another. The principle of ummah, all humanity is connected. And so these principles are consistent. They are great truths that are reflected in all religious traditions. And so with that common base, what do? How do we go forward to make a difference in the world? And this is where our discussion got passionate, because there was general agreement that we've got to get it out of this room. We're here talking to each other. We all agree. You know, we understand the importance of taking action, but unless it gets out of this room into our communities, then it's not making any difference. And so we talked about what can we do. And part of it was when we hear of an incident where there's hate or violence, we show up, we respond, we call it out for what it is. We gather with our fellow people of whatever faith or no faith, and we say with one unified voice, this is wrong. We will not stand for this. All our faith traditions condemn this. And when we speak with a united voice like that, the voice is strong. And then it was emphasized we need to be engaged in our communities, really engaged. And Imam Omar spoke about his experience staying in his neighborhoods, in his community, so people can see an example of a man of faith who is blessed by living his faith and is engaged with the youth. And there were some really inspiring examples of people of faith who have chosen to do that. In New York, Imam Siraj Wahaj, working in the neighborhoods, making a difference, individually connected with people individually. Jamal Cole's group here in Chicago, I think it's called My Block, My Hood, My City, where he's engaged, block by block. Some of us know Pastor Jay Brooks, doing wonderful, the Lawndale Miracle, working with youth at Lawndale. Pastor Chris Harris of the Bright Star Community Church, doing great work in the Inglewood communities. People who get it out of the rooms where we're talking about the things and actually engage with the youth in the community. So they're great examples. Imam Omar wants us to have a big parade with a few thousand faith leaders saying, faith is a power in our lives. It's a power for good. And let the youth who sometimes don't recognize their divinity realize that there are options, there are different paths for them to take. So I felt inspired. Sometimes we hear the news, we hear accounts of violence and hatred, and we sometimes despair. But I am convinced that although we may not have the solutions to the world's problems, we may not be able to solve the conflict in Gaza or what's happening around the world, but we can make sure that in the environment where we live, in Chicagoland, we can stand for respect, for peace. We can work together in a way that establishes a grassroots moral force. A grassroots moral force based on faith for good, where people can choose a life that is meaningful, that is filled with hope and purpose and service for others. And so it was an inspiring discussion. I'm very thankful to be a part of it. Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui.
Thank you, Bruce. Reverend Bruce Duffield is one of the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Greater Chicago area. I would like now to invite Dr. Marcia Manson from Loyola University, Professor of Theology. And the topic that she moderated is, how does my religious tradition understand presence of others' claim to truth?
Thank you very much. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful evening, and I found what I just heard from the other moderators so inspiring and great. And I'm just looking around the room and appreciating all of this positive energy. So the topic of truth. Well, our two tables in sequence began by introducing each other, and we found a diverse assembly, some Christians, Muslims, Zoroastrians, Baha'i, Latter-day Saints, an Indonesian guest, a Jewish friend who had come in search of truth. And the topic of our session was truth, which can be rather abstract at times. And what about the truth of others? We ended up being collectively identified, and we've bought into it, as seekers and strugglers in the path of truth. And it was really that path and the values that inspire that search and that go with us, that take us along towards the truth. A participant asked rather bluntly, why are we here? And some said we were here out of love. Some said we were here out of openness. Some said we are here to accept one another. And I couldn't help but thinking, this isn't a dawah event. That's an inside joke for Muslims. A dawah event is sort of an event that has a little edge of maybe potential proselytization possibilities. But maybe it is a dawah event, but the dawah, the call, the invitation, is an invitation to seek the truth and work for the good. Well, in terms of religious truth, and especially religious others, you may have heard that usually perspectives sort into pluralists, inclusivists, and exclusivists. We ended up deciding, hey, we're all pluralists. Can we have a sort of edgy conversation if we already feel that at the end of the day we're a little bit on the same page? But exclusivism then, is a challenge for us, right? How do we deal with maybe our own potential exclusivist tendencies, or the exclusivists within our own tradition, or exclusivist interpretations that, let's face it, are out there. At least I think Christians and Muslims who make ultimate universalistic claims have a tendency to go in that direction. And I couldn't help but wonder in my initial statement about the relationship of truth and salvation, right? The claim to salvation. So we found that our colleagues from the Zoroastrian tradition and from Judaism, since these are religions that do not emphasize a particular, only one way to salvation, that somehow perhaps we could learn from that. So back to speaking to exclusivism, in one session we explored some of the sources of exclusivism. In other words, only my path is right, or only my religion is right, or even intra-religious exclusivism, like only my interpretation of my religion, only a few are going to make it. And of course, on the one hand, there's a beauty in being the final revelation, being able to encompass all that have gone before. But progress can also include supersession. So in terms of our truth, do we feel, how inclusive are we really? And does supersession entail with it not being fully inclusive? And then interpretation of scripture. So we can quote the beautiful embracing verses, but we may find that our exclusivist colleagues may either quote other verses or may take the very same verses and end up saying, no, there's really only one way, the way that I understand things to be. So there's kind of historically a process of closing the canon, not wanting to sort of preclude any rethinking or change in understanding. And there may be inherent supremacy in feeling that you hold the exclusive truth. And after all, those in power are often the sources of the major symbolism of traditions, which may embed and privilege a particular race as symbolizing the divine, or even exclusively male imagery along the path. So there may be deeper, embedding of one way or exclusivism than we may have imagined. What are some of the challenges to exclusivism throughout history. One is the idea of the good other, the good other. You know, one may intellectually say, well, there's only one truth, only one right way. But then you find somebody completely other in the teachings of Jesus, the good Samaritan. Or, you know, the neighbor that you thought was so different from you, and then you find the inherent goodness, so we can learn from that. Or ultimately finding that the boundaries of truth that we thought were very rigid have become porous, and that we can expand to include much beyond what we originally thought was that only way. So I hope that our encounters tonight in these various topics have opened us to all kinds of new struggles and searches on the path to our shared truth and our commonality, which was another thing, the commonality of our traditions, and so much more that we have to learn from one another, both in terms of our professions of the values of our traditions that inspire us, and from each other as individuals and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marcia. Now I'm going to invite Dr. Babakar Makumbu. His topic was Fusing the Faith Community Space in Civil Societies.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It has been a privilege to sit through sessions with great minds who actually had the privilege and the opportunity to share on a topic which is basically civil society and the role of religious traditions in it. We know that basically one thing we agree from the get-go was that basically there have been a general trend of seeing a receding role for religious tradition as far as the discourse for civil society. And prior to that, we actually agree on one thing, that basically, as we look back in the history of America and the United States, we know that there have been a long-standing tradition, a long and important role played by civil society writ large, but more specifically within the civil society religious tradition. When we look around and see the number of institutions, including hospitals, universities, tend to be founded by religious organizations. So getting to a point where that voice is declining and receding is troubling, and we actually have tried to understand it along the line of the general trends, that we've seen in American society. In fact, that basically there is a overall pattern of seeing declining affiliation with organized religious tradition in the Americas. And that is something we see reflected in the presence of religious voice, of the religious voice in the overall civil society discourse. So obviously, we've tried to actually really diagnose the problem, see, where it's all coming from. And we've heard really a great number of insights and point of view, really amazing one. But one thing that actually came to mind was that basically there is a need for religious organization to look inward. Basically, first of all, to reconsider their overall tradition. Because when we look deep down in history, there is a sense that, well, religious organizations have come to be associated with a number of many evils that, young people tend to identify, including racism and misogynistic attitudes and behaviors, as well as exclusion and things along those lines. So therefore, there's a need for introspection that actually would start by basically recognizing the overall role of religious tradition in basically rehabilitating their position and their voice within this discourse, with this conversation. That is one form of solution that actually have been, advocated by some. Another point that actually have been, emphasized was the basic that need for religious organizations to come together, because it should be past time for religious organizations to be limited to themselves, to actually live in their own bubbles, in their own comfort zone, to actually form a type of coalition whose role would be basically to re-emphasize the historical role of religious organization in the making of the American society and American experience. So obviously, we've tried to look forward and look ahead, and a number of issues have come up, especially in regard to the type of challenges that actually are coming. One of which was basically the role of technology and how it is pretty much changing the meaning of civil society, but also the discourse that actually has traditionally been associated with civil society. So those are the issues that actually have been, addressed and pointed out by the great minds that actually I have had a chance to listen from. And I think overall there's a sense that deep down, religious tradition have a fundamental role to play. And that role needs to be rehabilitated and re-emphasized, because it is all toward creating or working for the greater good. And that is something that actually needs to be re-actualized and basically reinforced and really centered as a major point regarding the way forward. So those are the points. I hope I did justice to the many point of view and insight I got a chance to hear. But it's been a tremendous opportunity. Thank you all. So.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Now please welcome Reverend Stuart Barnes Jameson from Carter Westminster United Presbyterian Church in Skokie. And the topic that he moderated: can we develop a methodology to handle our religious and theological differences?
Yes, thank you for this. This evening has been a real honor. So forgive me while I kind of sort through my notes with all that I heard. To begin with, this topic is really kind of important to me because I think that we need to have a methodology for interfaith dialogue and that sort of thing. And I've studied a couple, and there are a couple of already existing nice methodologies out there, and especially around the whole issue of political polarization. And so, for instance, I'd just like to call out Mr. Elvin over here, who is with One America Movement. They have a very good methodology for helping to engage in conversation over political divides, and I think it can relate to the religious community as well. I'm also familiar with something called Living Room Conversations that does the same, and something called the Moral Courage Project out of the library at Skokie. So there's methodologies already out there. In the first group, one of Fatima Mirza talked really convincingly to me about the importance of having a methodology, and she said something about how a methodology for these kind of discussions and handling this puts things on autopilot. In other words, we can already just we can have a methodology, a practice we can use to have these conversations on a regular basis. And then there was a lot of discussion in the first group too about the different aspects of a methodology. Somebody brought up a nice 4-step possible methodology anyway. The four characteristics or parts, qualities of it in this kind of conversation would be humility, openness to being considered wrong. There's something else you have to learn in your faith. And then this concept of holy envy, that your faith has something that my faith longs for or doesn't have or doesn't do well, and vice versa. And to have this conversation always be curiosity-based as opposed to convincing or, the other person to change or something like that. And just the concept of intentional goodwill. And to that was added by a couple of people the concept that should be action-oriented. And we got a good example from the second group of an action-oriented process that began in dialogue, built consensus, and then went into action. And I thought that was a really helpful way to look at it. Again, there was I was also impressed with the Sikh approach to this. Spark of divinity is in everyone. Humankind is one. We don't see enemies. You heard that beautiful story illustrating that. And we don't other. And we are all together. So I thought there was a couple of other neat, just little tidbits I thought that were really helpful for this conversation. Asking each other the question, what in humility do we owe each other? What do we owe each other in humility? I thought that was a good one. And that we are all humans, and whatever I want for myself is also what I want for you. And there's more that unites us than divides us. And the importance of separating, we talked about this already too, separating politics from religion, and also separating culture from religion. I thought that was a very helpful thing too. And all that really, in the end, all civilizations are rooted in divine guidance. When we encounter challenges together, we make progress. We are all responsible to the one divine unity, and the importance of the Socratic method of asking questions as a way to engage and deal with religious differences. And everyone has a piece of the truth. That story about the blind man and the elephant, and they all reaching different, exploring different parts of the elephant and coming up with a different sense of it. And about halfway through the second session, I decided that I think I want to move to Indonesia. I was pretty impressed with the Pancasila, which is the 5 foundations of their culture and their government. The first one is belief in one God, regardless of your religious faith, humility, and the unity of the nation, the importance of dialogue, and insistence on justice for all. And I think I got that basically right, and I thought that was a very great foundation for us as we engage in interfaith traditions. So I think that's really basically what we talked about. We talked about the importance of entering into dialogue with respect and developing trust, which it takes a long time and it's a very long process. But not to stop at developing trust, but to move on. What are the second and third things we need to do after we have dialogue and have built trust? So the importance of action in our dealing with religious differences and finding a way to work together on commonalities, I think was a really important part of that. I think that's about all I had. But thanks for this opportunity. It really was wonderful.
Thank you, Reverend Stuart. Please welcome Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid of the Justice for All. And his topic was how to develop faith-based guidelines for the U.S. foreign policy to promote human dignity.
That was not my topic. That was topic of It's good to be here, and sitting there was regarding your mentor, Dr. Irfan Khan, who used to do these type of gatherings very often. We're lucky to do a place in Jeddah. Well, since it deals with foreign policy, first table was a little balanced, the second was all Muslims. So we beat up the poor old guy over there. He was very courteous and shared his thought about the later-day saints. So we modified a little bit how faith communities can influence foreign policy. But the topic was adopted before the new elections. So domestic policies did pop up, but are connected with international relations as well. So we discussed religious nationalism, a topic which was chosen by one of the members. In the United States and its connection with India. Another topic was women's rights, again domestically as well as internationally, and deportation, its international implications, and implications for our congregations right here in America. The Project 25 keep popping up no matter what we discuss. And someone doing a quick Google search to figure out what it is. But we came to conclude that there are Project 25. How many of you know Project 25? Well, a lot of people. I think someone on our table has informed, I guess. So headline everybody has seen, but in depth. So we came to recognize that there are nationalist, religious nationalist, white nationalist undertones to Project 25, which we also heard the Vice President-elect is a pretty big fan of. I have no research in that area. Similarly, limitation on women's rights was also traced back to Project 25 about some of the fears and deportation. So deportation, it was discussed that if President Trump carries out his policy of deporting 1 million in 2025 and will continue to do so, it will not only impact 1 million people, but it is going to impact all the families connected with that, maybe close to 5-10 million people. I shared my observation. I walk 20-30 minutes in downtown between my office and the train station in commuting. And there used to be a large number of new immigrants who were selling small things on the streets. The day after election, I could not find one. And that's in downtown, the heart of downtown. So fear and terror is in place. So we all agree that we need to do our best that this policy's announcement is, the campaign promise is not implemented. But we also encourage all the faith communities to go back to the drawing board of the human services we offer. Anytime American government closes its hearts, people of faith open their hearts. So this may be coming on our way. We need to pay attention to it now before it actually happens. It was noted that the religious nationalism in the United States is somewhat connected with the religious nationalism in India. It was noted of how many churches and mosques have been destroyed in India, and the person who murdered 77 Christians in Norway, in his manifesto, actually quotes and praises Hindu nationalists in India. And then he inspired other murders like in New Zealand, where Muslims praying on Friday were slaughtered. When it comes to how much influence can faith community can have, we didn't have a whole lot of discussion there, but here and there some points of hope came, which I'd like to share with you. About religious freedom. It has been an effort of Christian evangelicals in this country to influence US government policies towards religious freedom, which is good for all people. And there are 4 institutions established through law in our government which are independent except still the overall operating policies of the United States government. For example, none of those 4 institutions have said a single thing about Palestine or destruction of 500 or so mosques through bombs, by Israel, killing of people which scholars believe it's not smaller number, it is going to be close to 200,000. Not a single one of those institutions have said anything. That points to the limitation of what type of influence you can have. But around the table we also noted that some of the denominations actually do not have a policy position on Palestine in this area about ceasefire or about the only way to stop genocide is by US blocking those bombs. Those bombs, in 1 year more bombs have been dropped than the 7 years of World War, according to reports just day before yesterday. So that's the limit. But faced with the Zionist, well-organized Israeli lobby, what is it which you can do? But on the other hand, the same institution, United States, United States Institute for Religious Freedom in the World, or similar like that name, they were able to use a law in our books, which still exists, to ban Modi from entering the United States for 10 years. That is our institutions. So we can, and another success story was the rape being declared a war crime in the world, in which Muslim community, actually 8 Muslim leaders, 2 of them are still alive, may Allah give them good health. They came together and established Bosnian Task Force, and I was forced to coordinate that. We developed a coalition with National Organization of Women, and it campaigned. In 7 to 8 months, US House and Senate passed a resolution that rape should be declared war crime. It took United Nations about 3 years to put that in the book of international law, and many people since have been punished. So we conclude that once faith communities have a clear goal, which is beyond hummus and biryani and apple pie, they can educate their congregation, organize, develop broader coalition, and can influence the US foreign policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdul Malik Mujahid. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Michael Coe. I would like to personally thank him because he took over at the very last moment. And this session was supposed to be moderated by our common friend, Dr. Ahmed Murad, who was overseas and was supposed to be back on November 7th, but he caught up in a family emergency, and we both approached Michael, and he graciously accepted our invitation, and his topic is ethics of dealing with others. Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping to be here anyways, and I was totally shocked when Ahmed emailed me that he couldn't come here. But I'm very grateful to have been part of the conversation, and and we've had people from a variety of backgrounds that were around our tables. There were people, Muslims, Jew, Christians, Sikh, Latter-day Saints. We had this question about what ethical guidelines lead you when you are engaging in interfaith. We began to think about, and a good question to ask, what does that mean? The ethical guidelines that we are shaped by. To look deep into our own tradition and come up with some principles, or identify what principles exist within our own faith tradition that would guide us to act in an ethical manner when dealing with someone who's different than us, someone who comes from a different faith tradition. I think that what I heard in both of our groups, that fundamentally, that being a creature of God, that we come from God and we're going to God, or in some way expressing the fact that we are all, as a Christian we would say, made in the image of God, as in other traditions would say we are from God, or we are a creature of God, leads to a oneness that that undermines any sort of superiority. That you and I have a common humanity. And part of that common humanity is that we're going to respond to God. We're called by God to respond to Him. We live every day before the face of God, and we are accountable to God. That fundamentally would shape how we interact with one another. That basically, not behind myself and behind you, is God. Then drawn from that, we begin to think about, well, how does it get practiced? How's that going to come into shape? And I think one of the key words that I kept hearing over and over was the word respect. That we honor one another despite our differences. We honor each other as fellow human beings. We honor each other as those who are searching for God, those who are responding to God. That fundamental respect underlies how we treat one another. That we would not disparage another person, we would not misrepresent their views, but we would speak honestly and truthfully with them. I'm going to lose my paper here. But that also engaging another as a fellow human being would imply some sort of humility, where I have an opportunity to see myself through another person's eyes. I'm going to open myself up to you, and you will speak to me about what you believe, and you might ask me a question about what I believe. And it's a good chance for me to look into my own life and my own commitments and see myself. And I might grow through that. It's actually been my experience that I've grown through that too. We find that in each religious tradition is some emphasis on love. Love your neighbor as yourself, love another, treat another as you would want to be treated, or some way of expressing that, which would bring with it further the emphasis on kindness, honor, empathy. I'm going to love you, so I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to pay attention to you, I'm going to try to identify with you. And also the realization that we're all people of faith, and that we understand that faith brings goodness. That faith brings value into our community. And we want to affirm, protect, and defend each other as people of faith. Fundamentally, too, what I found a repeated value that was emphasized is the need for freedom. In my tradition, I believe deeply in religious freedom, and want to respect and honor that for everyone. And I think I heard the same from others. But also that part of growing in our faith interaction, our interfaith interaction, is to gain wisdom. There'll be some curiosity on my part about you, and I trust there'll be curiosity on your part about me, and that together we're going to grow in wisdom, a better understanding of ourselves, and hopefully become better human beings as a result. But since we are coming from God and going to God, we understand that the judgment is ultimately God's. It's been a joy to be part of this meeting, and I'm hoping that as a pinch hitter, I at least got a 300 average or something. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we want to spend about 10 minutes. If there is any pressing question that anyone may have, you can direct your question to one of these table hosts, if you have any, but you don't have to have necessarily. I mean, don't create an urge to necessarily ask a question, but if there is a question, we want to give you a chance to ask or to comment briefly, 1 minute.
Yeah, excuse me, there is a question there.
This is less a question and more a comment. I was wondering, what if we did an exercise where we all say in our religious texts our definition of God, I think we'll find some surprises here. So I'll start with for Sikhism, and I'll say it in Punjabi, and then I'll translate it. So, Ekankar Satnam Karta Purakh Nirbhau Nirvair Akal Murad Ajuni Sabam Gur Prasad. So what that means is there is one supreme being, the eternal truth, the creator without fear and devoid of enmity, immortal, never incarnated, self-existent, known by grace through the teacher. I would like to ask other faith people if they would say their definition of God and see how similar our definitions are.
That's good. That indicates two things. One, that you want to go home. Second, that you really enjoy the discussion and you want to reflect over it, think over it. So both desires could be at the same time. They are not contradicting. So before I invite, there are a couple of people who are going to come here to say a few words of thanks. I just want to remember the founding president of WCMIR, the late Dr. Irfan Ahmad Khan. He envisioned this interfaith movement, and he said that if the people of faith cannot create an interfaith movement, we are going to be in big trouble in the near future. And this organization was formed in 2001 in United Kingdom, Leicester, where he took us there, and to our surprise, there were 60 other people from 10 different countries. And we discussed the need for it, developed a constitution, and the organization was founded. I just want to share a brief quote, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and I just want to reflect on that in relation to what we have done here on different tables. Quote, we only need one thing. We only need one thing, and that is peace. And that is peace. And the only way way for that is all forces of good unite. All forces of good unite. So I consider each one of you part of that force. Part of that force. And friends, this was round 1 of the difficult conversations. We want to have even more difficult topics to discuss with you. In round 2 or 3, question on establishing peace, stopping genocide, and coming together to create a strong moral force. I feel an urge to share with you that we, the people of faith, have left the affairs of the world to the politicians who are extremely corrupt and who have vested interest and who don't care about, no matter if they receive a 1 million email about certain issue. So it is necessary that through our discussions and dialogue, we come together to work for the common good of the humanity. Because each one of you is connected to a congregation. 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people. That is grassroots. You drive your power from your congregations. So why we are just sitting and letting the politician do whatever? No, that has to change. That has to change. Over the past 3 months, we have been communicating with
I was hearing a brother mentioning how impactful it could be if faith-based communities work together. We heard the ethics of our relationships and how we work together. And we heard some concrete examples how faith-based communities, when work together and pave the way in implementing laws that help the vulnerable and victims of war-torn areas, and so many other topics that are essential and important. On behalf of CILGC, thank you so much for your commitment to this work and for the invaluable perspectives that you have shared today. I look forward to seeing how today's discussion will inspire continued collaboration, and so thoughtfully and so beautifully Dr. Siddiqui mentioned a few things and how CILGC can assist with those things. Safe travels back home, and thank you again. Thank you.
And now finally, our WCMIR Secretary, Dr. Tanveer Azmat, to say a few words of thanks on behalf of WCMIR.
Well, the first thank belongs to God, who brought us all together in this wonderful gathering today, and have us the courage to talk about difficult conversations. I think we need more of these conversations so that we open our hearts and discuss the issues which really matter. This program would not have been possible without your presence among us. I would specifically like to thank the lead discussants for their leadership role, all participants, and CIOGC for their sponsorship and volunteers. We hope we continue this discussion further, educate our respective communities, and take concrete steps to walk together in the world we right now inherit. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Siddiqui and all the members and volunteers who work to make this program possible. And we want to thank them to let us go after 5 hours. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tanveer. Personally, I would like to acknowledge and thank our brother Javed Aslam and brother Khalid Khan. These are the two people who have been working together with me day and night for the last few days to make this happen. We have some food left. There are some to-go boxes. Please help yourself, whatever you want to take.